I never expected that moving into a shared apartment would feel like walking into a live-action rom-com, directed entirely by someone else's twisted sense of humor. There I was, lugging boxes and pretending I didn't notice his impossibly bright smile, while he seemed to have made it his personal mission to dismantle my carefully constructed emotional walls. It started with a simple "welcome to the apartment" handshake that lasted a little too long. Then came the casual brushes when he passed behind me, always lingering just a second longer than necessary. I chalked it up to him being friendly, overly touchy maybe, but harmless. But then it escalated. "Why do you always make that face when I'm around?" he asked one evening, leaning against the doorway with that irritatingly confident smirk. "What face?" I replied, too aware of the heat crawling up my neck. "That face," he said, tilting his head as if he were analyzing a rare painting. And then, before I could answer, he kissed me. Not a quick peck, but a kiss that dragged on long enough for my brain to short-circuit and my heart to leap into overdrive. I stumbled backward, tripping over a chair, my thoughts a scrambled mess. What was that?" He shrugged, like it was nothing. "I thought you might like it," he said, eyes sparkling with mischief. I wanted to laugh, cry, and punch him all at once. My roommate, straight as the road outside, had just kissed me, and I wasn't even sure if I hated it or if I loved it more than I wanted to admit. The days that followed were a torturous blend of anticipation and paranoia. Every time he walked past, every time he leaned over to grab a cup from the kitchen, I was certain he'd kiss me again. And every time my stomach did that stupid, uncontrollable flutter. It wasn't just the kisses. It was the way he laughed at my dumb jokes before they even landed, the way he remembered the tiniest details about my life, the way he sat next to me so close I could feel the heat from his arm. It was infuriating and yet intoxicating. One Friday night, after a long week of classes and obligatory social events I pretended to enjoy, I found myself alone with him in the living room. We had ordered takeout, the smell of spicy noodles filling the small apartment, and I was trying not to look at him as he sprawled on the couch in his usual careless charm. "Eat something," he said, nudging the plate toward me with his foot. His eyes met mine, and I swear I saw a flicker of something I couldn't quite name. I sat down, barely touching the food. "I'm fine," I muttered, though the room felt impossibly hot. He tilted his head, studying me like a cat pondering whether to pounce or nap. "You're not fine," he said softly. "Stop pretending." And just like that, he was on me again. His lips brushed mine, lighter this time, teasing, almost playful. But I felt myself melting under the warmth, my walls crumbling in ways I hadn't imagined possible. I started, but the words died on my lips as he deepened the kiss, his hands tracing the lines of my shoulders like he already knew the map of my nervous energy. We pulled back, breathing hard, foreheads pressed together. "Why do you keep doing this?" I whispered. "Are you joking with me?" He chuckled, low and genuine. "Do I look like I'm joking?" he asked, though his grin betrayed a vulnerability he rarely let anyone see. "I like you. I think I've liked you since day one." I froze, my mind spinning faster than I could process. This was the moment that would define everything or ruin it. I wanted to argue, to push him away, to pretend it was a fluke, but my body betrayed me, leaning into his warmth instead. Over the next few weeks, the apartment became a battlefield of suppressed emotions and stolen glances. I caught myself planning my mornings around his schedule, hoping for accidental encounters by the fridge or the couch. He would suddenly appear in the doorway with a grin, and my pulse would spike before I could stop it. One night, I found him sitting on the fire escape outside, staring at the city lights. I had followed him, compelled by a need I didn't understand. "You think too much," he said without looking at me, his voice carrying that calm certainty that made me ache. "Maybe," I admitted, leaning against the railing next to him. The night air was cold, but he didn't flinch, and I wanted to reach for his hand without thinking. "I don't know if this is easy for you," he continued, finally glancing at me. "It's not easy for me either, but I can't stop." His confession was like a spark in dry grass. I wanted to argue, to say we shouldn't, to remind ourselves that everyone would call him straight and everyone would see this as insane, but none of that mattered. Not tonight. Not when he looked at me like I was the only thing keeping him grounded. The next kiss was slow, deliberate, not the playful teases of before. Every touch, every press of our lips, felt like a silent promise. The city lights flickered below us, indifferent to the world-altering intimacy happening on a narrow ledge, and yet, in that moment, it felt like we were the only two people alive. Back inside, the apartment seemed smaller, the air thicker with possibility. We sat close on the couch, shoulders touching, hands brushing, each of us too afraid to speak, yet understanding everything without words. "Do you ever think about what it means?" I asked finally, voice low, trembling. "All the time," he admitted, tracing the outline of my hand with his fingers. "But I don't care what it means to anyone else. I care about what it means to us." And in that moment, a fragile trust began to form, one built on stolen kisses, shared fears, and the quiet certainty that maybe, just maybe, we were breaking the rules in the only way that truly mattered, together. The tension didn't vanish overnight. There were still awkward mornings, moments when reality crept back in, when I wondered if he would wake up and decide it had all been a joke. But each time he smiled at me, brushed my hair from my forehead, or kissed me lightly as we passed in the hallway, I felt my skepticism crack just a little more. One evening, as the sunset bled into the living room, casting long shadows across the floor, he reached for my hand. "I'm not joking," he said, his eyes earnest. "I want this. You, me. No games." I swallowed hard, letting the words sink in. I wanted to say something clever, something guarded, but all I could do was nod, because deep down I had already stopped fighting, already given in to the dizzying, terrifying, wonderful chaos of loving someone who was supposed to be off limits. Days turned into weeks, and the fragile trust we were building began to solidify into something real. Each stolen kiss, each lingering touch, became less about secrecy and more about discovery, learning each other's rhythms, fears, and desires. Yet, despite the tenderness, shadows of doubt never fully disappeared. One rainy afternoon, the kind where water streaks the apartment windows and the world feels impossibly small, we sat together on the couch, our legs intertwined beneath a blanket. He had been quiet, unusually pensive, and I sensed the storm inside him mirrored the one outside. "What's on your mind?" I asked gently, tracing his jawline with my thumb. He sighed, looking out at the blurred cityscape. "People will judge us. You know they will. Friends, family. Everyone expects me to be straight. And here I am, kissing you like it's the most natural thing in the world." I felt my heart tighten. The thought of him being forced to hide his feelings, or worse, to deny them, was unbearable. "Let them," I said, my voice firmer than I intended. "We can't live for their expectations. We have to live for ourselves." His eyes met mine, vulnerability and longing intertwining in a way that made my chest ache. Slowly, he leaned in, resting his forehead against mine. "You really think we can do this?" "I don't just think it," I whispered. "I know it." The weeks that followed tested us in ways I hadn't imagined. Subtle judgment from peers, awkward encounters with other roommates, and the ever-present question of whether we were really meant to be together kept gnawing at the edges of our happiness. But every time the world pressed down, we pressed back harder, holding on to each other with quiet defiance. One night, as the city skyline glowed with the lights of countless apartments, he took my hand and led me to the roof of our building. The wind tugged at our clothes, and I shivered not from cold, but from the raw intensity of the moment. "I want to make this official," he said, voice steady despite the trembling in his hands. "No more hiding, no more questions, just us." I laughed softly, the sound caught between disbelief and joy. "You mean, like a real relationship?" He grinned, that same mischievous sparkle in his eyes that had made me fall for him in the first place. "Exactly. Are you in?" Without hesitation, I nodded, feeling a surge of relief and exhilaration. "I'm in. Always in." From that night on, things shifted. We didn't have to whisper in corners or sneak touches when no one was watching. Our love became a quiet, resilient presence, visible yet intimate. We shared more than just kisses. We shared our fears, our dreams, and our absurd little quirks. He knew exactly how I liked my coffee, how I needed a soft pillow on my side of the bed, the silly way I hummed when nervous. And I knew him in the same intimate way, the curve of his smile when he was proud, the subtle tension in his shoulders when he was anxious, the way his laughter could fill a room and make everything feel lighter. There were still hard days. Days when whispers and sideways glances reminded us that society wasn't fully ready to accept what we had. But each challenge made our bond stronger. We learned to fight together, to support each other, and to savor the little victories. Like holding hands openly on a crowded street, or leaning against each other on the couch without worrying about who might see. One particularly ordinary Tuesday, we found ourselves cooking dinner together in the cramped kitchen. Laughter echoing off the walls as noodles boiled over and spices flew in all directions. I caught his eye across the counter, and in that glance, all the words we had struggled to say were spoken silently. Love, trust, hope, and a lifetime of possibilities. "Promise me something," he said suddenly, sprinkling salt into the sauce with exaggerated care. "What?" I asked, pretending to be absorbed in chopping vegetables. "Promise me that we'll never let go, no matter what the world throws at us," he said, stepping closer so our arms brushed. I didn't hesitate. "I promise." From then on, our apartment became a sanctuary, a space where our love could breathe freely. We decorated together, laughed over silly mistakes, and celebrated each small triumph as if the world outside didn't exist. His mischievous grins remained, but now they were softened by a profound tenderness that only grew deeper with time. One evening, wrapped in blankets on the couch, the rain tapping softly against the window, he turned to me and said, "You know, I never thought I could feel this happy. I thought being myself meant being lonely." I smiled, brushing his hair from his forehead. "You're not lonely anymore," I whispered. "And neither am I." The weeks rolled into months, and our love continued to blossom, resilient and luminous against the backdrop of a world still learning to accept us. We learned to navigate public spaces with subtle defiance, holding hands at coffee shops, sitting together in class, laughing at whispered comments, all the while strengthening the unspoken bond that tethered us together. Then came the day when we decided to share our story openly, to face friends and family with the truth of our love. It wasn't easy. There were raised eyebrows, awkward silences, and a few sharp words. But through it all, we stood side by side, unwavering, letting our love speak louder than doubt. "You were right," he said later that evening, leaning against the doorframe as we surveyed the small apartment that had witnessed the evolution of our love. "We can do this. Together." I nodded, feeling the full weight of everything we had overcome. "Together?" I echoed, squeezing his hand. And in that moment, the world outside the walls of our apartment didn't seem so threatening anymore. Our love, once a fragile secret, had grown into a defiant, beautiful reality. The stolen kisses had become shared smiles, the teasing touches became gentle caresses, and the playful moments that once made me question everything now made me certain that this was exactly where I was meant to be. Sitting there with him, watching the city lights flicker against the night sky, I realized that love messy, unexpected, and transformative was worth every moment of fear, every pang of doubt. It wasn't easy, and it never would be, but it was ours, and that made all the difference. As he leaned in to press a soft, lingering kiss to my lips, I couldn't help but laugh softly, a mixture of disbelief and utter contentment. "I guess you weren't joking after all," I murmured. He grinned, eyes sparkling with the same mischievous warmth that had first drawn me in. "Nope," he said simply. "Not joking. Never joking. Just you. And me." And in that embrace, with the city sprawling endlessly below and the quiet hum of life surrounding us, I finally understood what it meant to love and be loved completely without hesitation, without pretense, and without fear. Our hearts, once fragile and uncertain, had found their home in each other. And for the first time, the future felt not only possible but undeniably, breathtakingly beautiful. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated with the latest videos.